Hello, Croeso Fulcher. Welcome back to the channel, Old Boy here. And today we're in Edinburgh because we're going to be checking out what could quite possibly be one of the most exciting celebrations of the ancient Celtic calendar, Beltane, the festival of fire, fertility and the turning of the year. As the 1st of May draws ever nearer, we walk a fine line between spring and summer, shadow and light, old and new. But what are the origins of this ancient festival? Join me as we explore the history, mythology and enduring customs of Beltane, the fiery Celtic festival rooted in nature, ritual and the great cycle of the year. The word Beltane, or more correctly Beltane, is derived from the Old Irish word Bealtaine. In a 10th century glossary compiled by Bishop Cormac MacKillenan, it is described as Beltane, that is Bel's fire. That is the fire of Bel, which is 2 auspicious fires the Druids made with great spells, and each year they brought the cattle between them against pestilence. These twin fires marked the start of the pastoral summer, when herds were moved to upland grazing. According to the literature, this spiritual rite, which involved the crossing of the flames, was both seen as a blessing and a protection. The Brythonic counterpart of Beltane survives as Callan Mai in Welsh and Breton, but only Beltane seems to have carried these fire-centred rituals. The celebration was one of the 4 great Celtic cross-quarter days, which in the Irish language are Samhain, Imbolg, Bealtaine and Lunasa, all times when the veil between worlds was seen to grow thin. Beltane was more than just a seasonal celebration. It was seen as a liminal point, a crossing place where the veil between worlds grew thin. In the first branch of the Mabinogi, May Day marks the moment when Pwyll encounters a spectral rider, Rhiannon, riding a white horse, always just out of reach. She leads him towards his destiny as ruler and husband, his fate challenged by a single encounter across time and space. In Llydd and Llefelys, a terrible scream pierces the kingdom each May Eve, halting sleep and causing miscarriages. And in the tale of Culhwch and Olwen, May Eve becomes the night of reckoning between Gwyn ap Nudd, king of the dead, and Gwythyr ap Greidawl. In this particular tale, we find similar motifs to that found in the ancient Greek story of Persephone, as Creidalad, a maiden of spring, is abducted from her betrothed, Gwythyr, by Gwyn. Ultimately, both men are tasked with fighting each other from May Day until the Day of Judgment, with the victor being granted the hand of Creidalad. In the Irish records, the East Shee, or fairy folk, were said to roam freely on this night. Wells, mounds and darkened woods were avoided, lest one stumble into their path and never return. Even in the heroic cycles, Beltane carries weight. The slaying of King Ailill by Conall Cernach takes place on May the 1st, a mythic act of balance and renewal through ritual combat. Beyond the myth, Beltane marked a vital moment in the agricultural calendar. Under early Irish law, May the 1st was one of the quarter days, points in the year when rents were due, contracts renewed, and legal obligations began anew. Cattle, central to wealth and status, were driven to the high pastures. Their health and reproduction were key to survival, making this a time of both prosperity and risk. In Wales, families left the Hendere, their winter homestead, for the Hafod or summer shealing deep in the uplands. This transhumanance was practical but sacred, a ritual of return. Movement often brought exposure to disease and unpredictable weather. and communities relied on the goodwill of nature and often on charms and rites to protect what they carried into the wild hills. With spring's arrival, flowers returned and ancient beliefs stirred with them. May morning dew was said to be gathered before sunrise by young women, thought to bring beauty and healing throughout the year. But this gentle charm was balanced by caution. Beltane was also a time of fairy mischief. Milk curdled, butter failed, livestock wandered off, often blamed on unseen hands. To ward them off, households decorated their thresholds with yellow blossoms, gorse, marigold and primrose, each one believed to deter wandering spirits. In Ireland, the maybush stood as a totem of good luck, often a branch of hawthorn adorned with coloured ribbons, eggshells and coins. These sacred trees invoked blessings, and if treated with care, could secure a household's fortune for the year ahead. At its heart, Beltane was joyous, wild, and alive with playful rebellion. In parts of the Highlands and the Isles, people were said to don leafy disguises or animal skins, and there are accounts of people jumping over the flames or even running through the Beltane fire as symbols of purification, daring, and fertility. The Beltane bannock, a simple oat cake, was baked in the fire, but among the loaves, one was darkened with ash. The unlucky soul who drew this ash-covered loaf was symbolically marked as the scapegoat. This person was either mocked, banished, or otherwise excluded from the feast, symbolically carrying away the community's bad luck and misfortune for the coming year. These rituals of inversion, which utilised masks, jokes and expulsions, seem to symbolise a deeper seasonal truth, representing the chaos that precedes order and the necessary upheaval before renewal can occur. Beltane, or Bel's Fire, as it was described earlier by Cormac MacKillenan, may symbolise more than just the sunlight of spring. Some scholars trace the etymology of the bell element in Beltane to the Proto-Indo-European root behel, meaning white or shining. This same root, some scholars argue, is also found in the name Belenus, a Celtic deity often syncretised with Apollo, who is associated with light, prophecy, and healing. But recent linguistic work by Peter Shriver opens a deeper possibility. The divine name Belenus may derive not from brightness alone, but from the ancient word for Henbane, a powerful psychoactive and medicinal plant. Early Welsh texts record Bele or Bella as Henbane, perhaps preserving an old Celtic root and a deep link between the god and the plant. This is particularly striking, given that Belenus is often identified with Apollo, and Henbane itself was known in Latin as Apollinaris herba, or the herb of Apollo, as noted by Pliny the Elder. In the oracular and healing traditions of the ancient Greek world, particularly in the cults of Apollo, psychoactive plants known as pharmakon were used in fumigations during rituals. These rituals were considered a form of catharsis or purification with the intent of healing. Those who inhaled the smoke or consumed these plants were believed to become entheos, meaning filled with the god, essentially entering a state of divine possession. In this state, the deity would speak through the individual, often in the form of an oracle. This was sometimes referred to as divine inspiration or pneumatos, where the person became a vessel for the god's voice. Similar practices were seen in the healing temples of Asclepius and in the cult of Bes in Ptolemaic Egypt, where psychoactive plants, including the herb of Bes mentioned in the Greek magical papyri, were used to bring about states of divine possession and healing. So how does this connect to Henbane? Well, we find several shared motifs in the Beltane celebrations, particularly the ritual purification of cattle through the smoke of sacred fires. These fires, according to Cormac MacKillenan, were said to be kindled by the Druids with great spells. But in the ancient world, a spell was more than just words. It was a potent ritual act, often intertwined with the use of psychoactive substances. In Indo-European cultures, incantations and intoxication were closely linked. The word pharmakon, or drug, which we've already mentioned, is a Greek term that also encompasses the meaning of a medicine, charm, or spell. The knowledge of drugs and poisons was seen as magical, and those who wielded such knowledge were referred to as a magus, the precursor to the modern word mage. This connection between pharmakon and spell is significant, as it shows how the ancient world viewed psychoactive substances, not just as tools for healing, but as instruments for divine or magical arts. To add more fuel to the fire, there are even mentions of a particular magus in the Irish sources. For example, in the Toynbee Cúlne, Cuchulainn is described as being given a raven-feathered mantle which was originally owned by Simon Magus, and Simon Magus is also credited as being the teacher of the druid Mugrui. In addition to this, in the Irish texts themselves, the term druid is often used to translate the Latin word magus. Conversely, the ecclesiastical texts, which were written in Latin, render the term druid as magus, possibly underscoring the perceived equivalence between the two words and reflecting their shared associations with the magical arts. So could Shriver be right in suggesting that Belenus is connected to Henbane, and that this plant is also tied to the bell mentioned by Cormac MacKillenan? Was henbane or a similar plant used in the fumigation of people and cattle, as part of the Druids' rituals? The idea of spells being used to kindle the Beltane fires suggests a deeper connection to the use of psychoactive substances. The term being used in the texts is auspicious fires, which brings us back to the concept of auspices or auspicium, a form of divination based on observing signs, omens, or divine premonitions as practiced by the augurs of the Mediterranean world. This connection between the smoke, the plant, and the fire reminds us that in the ancient world, rituals were often entwined with both divine insight and intoxication. As we saw earlier, the Greek word pharmakon encompassed both the concept of medicine and magic, using smoke not only for purification, but to invoke divine presence and guidance. If that's not enough to go on, let's look at the practices of the Etruscan Hirpi Sorani, also known as the Wolves of Soranus. Soranus, also known as Suri, was seen as a chthonic or underworld version of Apollo, and each year the Hirpi Sorani held a fire festival in his honour. What's fascinating about this is the Hirpi Sorani was said to run barefoot through the flames, seemingly without harm, and are also described as jumping over the fires with joy and exultation, which is a strikingly similar description to the accounts of the Beltane fires which we looked at earlier. Some sources even say the Hirpi Sorani would coat their feet with an ointment before jumping and walking through the fires, and I suspect this might have been a henbane decoction, as henbane can be absorbed through the skin and it has both pain-relieving and euphoric effects, which match what we see described in these rituals. It also seems logical to me that in a rite dedicated to Apollo, the herb of Apollo would have been utilised. There is also a similar Iranian celebration of Zoroastrian origin called Shahar Sharambe Suri, which is a rite used to usher in the Iranian New Year. Performed on the evening before the last Wednesday of the year, it acts as a lead-up to Nowruz and the vernal equinox, symbolising the cleansing and renewal of the year. This particular celebration also involves the kindling of fires, and people leap over the flames in order to be purified. In addition to this, oracles were told, as well as the burning of rue or frankincense, a fumigation which was said to ward off the evil eye. Both of these substances are psychoactive, and while rue is known as an MAO inhibitor, both were commonly used in ritual contexts, including rites related to the Greek mysteries. Finally, the association between Beltane and yellow flowers, such as gorse, marigold and primrose, may reflect an ancient herbal tradition, not merely as cheerful decorations, but as solar charms, with their golden hues echoing the divine colour of Henbane and its reputed power to guard the threshold between worlds. Though centuries may have passed, Beltane endures, transformed but still rooted in an older seasonal tradition. In Edinburgh, thousands gather each year on Carlton Hill to mark May Day with fire, procession and symbolic performance. Figures such as the May Queen and Green Man enact the cycle of renewal, evoking pre-modern ritual forms in a contemporary setting. It is still said that at dawn, some people still climb Arthur's Seat to wash their faces in the morning dew, preserving an ancient folk tradition. These events, while modern in expression, function as acts of cultural remembrance, continuing the transmission of seasonal rites through public engagement and communal participation. Beltane remains a festival deeply rooted in seasonal change and symbolic renewal, tied to fire, fertility, and the shifting boundaries between worlds. Whether its rites once involved psychoactive plants or served as gateways for divination and healing, we may never know for certain. But what does endure, however, is the power of ritual to bind community, to mark transition, and to echo something older than memory itself. Thanks once again for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please do consider subscribing. Catch you on the next one. Old Boy, out.